Welcome to the March 17th, 2026 work session of the Mayor and City Council of Hagerstown. The meeting is now called to order. First up, I'd like to have Robert Banzoff come up. We have a proclamation for National Surveyors Week.
Well, happy St. Patrick's Day. And it's snowing. Just a flake here and there.
All right, National Surveyors Week was proclaimed nationally by the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, on February 13th, 1984, and is recognized every year starting the third Sunday in March. And the goal of the National Surveyors Week is to educate the public on the importance of surveying, which has been a part of the advancement of civilizations since the beginning of recorded history. And in 1762, surveyors in the employ of Jonathan Hager laid out Elizabethtown, which later incorporated as Hagerstown by the Act of Assembly in 1813. And the state of Maryland has established only 5 licensed design professions regulated by the licensing board, one of which is professional land surveying. And in addition to defining boundaries for land ownership, surveyors are also involved in the planning, construction, and as-built mapping of roadways, bridges, buildings, subdivisions, and all the supporting infrastructure, including but not limited to water, sewer, electricity, natural gas, storm drainage, and stormwater management. Therefore, I, William McIntyre, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim March 15th through the 21st, 2026 as National Surveyors Week and encourage the citizens of Hagerstown to recognize professional surveyors and the important work they do for our community. Congratulations.
I think you said it all. Let's just say thank you to you, the mayor, and the council.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Oh. Well, thank you so much. No problem. Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's
Oh, wow.
and one vacation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, let's keep on reading. Preliminary agenda review. Next week, we'll have our call to order. Well, first at 7 p.m. regular session. I'm sorry, 5:30 is our work session, and at 7 p.m. is regular session. We'll have our call to order, invocation, pledge to the flag, announcements, our rules of procedure effective November 18th, 2025. Use of cell phones during meetings is restricted. All correspondence for distribution to elected officials should be provided to the city clerk and should include a copy for the city clerk for inclusion in the official record. Our meeting schedule for April is Tuesday, April 7th, 2026, a work session at 4 p.m. Tuesday, April 14th, 2026, work session at 4 p.m. Tuesday, April 21st, 2026, work session at 4 p.m. And Tuesday, April 28th, 2026, regular session at 7 p.m. We'll have 2 proclamations next week is Women's History Month and Child Abuse Awareness Month. We'll have citizen comments. 30 minutes are allotted for citizen comments for items germane to the City of Hagerstown business. Also, just a reminder, you have to be signed up 24 hours in advance. You can sign up online prior to the scheduled meeting. We'll have approval minutes for February 3rd, 2026, February 5th, 2026, February 10th, 2026, February 17th, 2026, and February 24th, 2026. Under consent agenda, engineering, change order to contract for PAL building renovation, City Hall, Fire Escape Maintenance, INL Construction LLC, Oxon Hill, Maryland, $32,190.50. A 2026 Ford Bronco from Keystone Ford, Chambersburg, PA, $31,352. City Hall 4th floor renovations, GRC General Contractor, Zollinger, Pennsylvania, $1,125,000 even. Planning and Economic Development, 2026 Ford Explorer, Keystone Ford, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, $38,268. Under Public Works, Diesel Fuel Dispensing Unit, Spigler Petroleum Equipment LLC, Westminster, Maryland, $15,061.72. City Park Fence Replacement Long Fence Company, Imesville, Maryland, $12,292. Mini Full Matrix Portable Changeable Message Board, Advanced Government Services, Tacoma, Washington, $38,400. Motorola SLR 8,100 watt radio repeater, Hankey's Radio Incorporated, Frederick, Maryland, $14,524. Custodial Services, Customer Service Center, Ragland Cleaning Services, Hagerstown, Maryland, $45,600. Under Utilities, under Light, Emergency Repairs, Substation Transformer, Power Substation Services, LLC, Wheeling, West Virginia, $10,784. Blanket contract for heavy-duty diesel truck maintenance. Say that 5 times in a row. Transtech Incorporated, Hagerstown, Maryland, $35,000. Manual meter reading software, licensing and support, Smartphone Meter Reading, LLC, Plano, Texas, $10,055.39. Underwater, the Hack Analyzer Maintenance Contract Renewal, Loveland, Ohio, $19,336. R.C. Wilson, WTP Roof Placement, Garland DBS Incorporated, Cleveland, Ohio, $1,454,855. Underwater Wastewater, Engineering Services for Development of Master Plan for Water and Wastewater, Black and VTech, Gaithersburg, Maryland, $2,790,365. Under Wastewater, Environmental Laboratory Auto Samplers, HD Supply, Atlanta, Georgia, $29,290.11. Parts to Rebuild 08 blowers, which are 3 of them. Hereza Technical Service Incorporated, Columbia, Maryland, $14,220.65. Roof Replacement Pelletizer Building, Garland DBS Incorporated, Cleveland, Ohio, $417,429.60. And a Vehicle Purchase Unit 501, Hertrick Mead Fleet Services Incorporated, Milford, Delaware, $30,188. There is no unfinished business. New business, introduction of an ordinance, rezoning of Charlie Drive, Emmerich Road, introduction of an ordinance, rezoning of Evergreen Property, Eastern Boulevard, approval of a resolution, summer camp grants, approval of a resolution, parking lease agreement with Maryland Judiciary District Court, approval of a resolution, declaration of official intent to use proceeds of a future borrowing to reimburse cost of the W/WW Treatment Plant Incorporated, approval of a resolution, the ARC grant application, approval of resolution, rescind license agreement for monument at Kilpatrick Woods, approval of a resolution, new license agreement for monument at Kilpatrick Woods, approval of a resolution, license agreements for murals, approval of the agreement with the Meridian Group, Summit Avenue Railroad Crossing, approval of the agreement with the Maryland Department of Transportation's improvement to Virginia Avenue and Walnut Street Railroad crossings, approval of the agreement with CSX Transportation, Summit Avenue Railroad Crossing, approval of full requirements electric service agreement with BP Energy Company, approval of strategic properties grant with Bowman, approval of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees 1540 contract, approval of FY 27 through 29 pavement preservation list, and approval of a donation to the City of Hagerstown Auxiliary Unit. We'll have our city administrator comments, mayor and council comments, and then we will adjourn. And that does it for the preliminary agenda. Next up, we'll have Mr. Eric Dykey for the 2026 Summer Camp Grant Program.
Good afternoon. This is our annual funding for the 2026 Summer Camp Grant Program. We have a number of groups around the city that provide summer camps for the kids in the area. And they use a lot of our parks, whether it's Pangbourne, City Park. Most of them use our pool. And so we budget $75,000 in our recreation budget to help fund these camps. This year, we had 3 applications, Boys and Girls Club of Washington County, Girls Inc., Washington County, and the YMCA. And so their request total $62,500. And so this year, we are able to fully fund those 3 groups. That's pretty much what it is.
All right. Any questions for Eric? Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next up, Mr. Jim Bender for the 2027-29 pavement preservation lists.
Good afternoon.
came to the council in February and made a presentation about our pavement preservation program, and we had just received the results of the survey that was conducted of all the streets in the city that identified where we're doing well on maintaining streets and where we need to do some additional work. And using that information that was in that study, we went back and looked at the list of streets that we want to repave over the next 3 years. And that is important not only as a planning tool for engineering, but it's also important to both city utility departments and non-city utilities like Columbia Gas, because if we need to let them know, next year we're going to be repaving, let's say Spruce Street. If you've got main replacements or other major maintenance that you need to do on your facilities, we want you to do that before we pave the street. So we try to give them advance notice of what we're thinking, where we're going to be paving these streets. And we do that for a 3-year period. So what you have in your packet is what we're saying is the final list for FY27, which would be completed in the spring of 2027. And then we call them draft lists for FY28 and FY29. Over the course of the next year, we'll continue to look at the streets on that list. If we see that there are other streets that are in poor condition that we want to swap in for some of the streets that are on those lists, we can do that. But we try to give at least a year's notice to these utility companies so that they can plan their maintenance and capital improvements. So I'd be asking for approval of the FY27 list and just acknowledgement that we have the draft lists for 28 and 29.
I just have one question. I think as it applies to letting utilities know and as it applies to getting your best bid for the contract, do you also take into consideration the proximity? In other words, I noticed in FY27, where is it at, where it says Bramley? There's a street connecting to Bramley. What is it? Yeah. And then you go on to the next year and then it says Bramley. I just found it odd that you're going to have you let the utilities know, but then there's 2 separate years that you bounce from one place to an directly adjoining street where you don't do them. So
Right. We try to avoid that because you're right, it does make sense for our contractor. If they're going to be working in a certain neighborhood, why don't we try to hit all of those streets that are somewhere on these lists? We try to do that to, I guess, the extent that we can. We're also looking at other things there. There may be a street in a neighborhood that really needs attention immediately, but the other streets maybe are not in as bad a shape. And so it is sort of a juggling act to try to figure out where to concentrate. And we do work with the contractor because it's easier for them. I mean, they want to mobilize into a neighborhood and do as much work as they can there before they have to load up their equipment and go across town to do something else.
yeah, that's the only one I noticed where there was sort of a direct connectivity between 2 streets.
And we could look at that. What we might be able to do is reach out to the various utility departments and see if they don't have any issues, then we could flop what's on the 27 list into the, flop it back a year so we're completing both of those at the same time.
Any other questions for Jim?
No.
Good.
We're good.
Okay. Everybody good with the streets and give him a nod for 28 and 29? Good.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Got one more.
Yep, closure of Summit Avenue Railroad.
Right, so this has been a long-going discussion here at the city about the closure of the railroad crossing in Summit Avenue. And there are a number of different players involved with this, obviously CSX Transportation, Maryland Department of Transportation, the private developer, the Meridian Group, that has interest in seeing that crossing closed, and Columbia Gas as well. And so last year in June, I came to the council, made a presentation, and then the council approved a motion that said, yes, we will agree to close the Summit Avenue crossing, but there are 4 main conditions that need to be met. And I just want to run through those real quickly. The first condition was that the city is going to have costs to physically close the crossing. We're going to have to remove pavement, we're going to have to install new curbs, some signage. So the condition was that the city would be reimbursed by someone for those costs. And we have a separate agreement with the Meridian Group, TMG, where they have agreed to reimburse the city up to $40,000 for our costs, and also reimburse the city for up to $70,000 that CSX is probably going to charge us for their costs to close the crossing. So that agreement, TMG has signed that agreement. They're on board with that. So I think that condition, I think, has been fulfilled. Second condition was that the concerns with Columbia Gas had to be addressed. And that had to do with if the Summit Avenue crossing is closed, it was going to be difficult for Columbia Gas's large delivery trucks to make it to their site on Sycamore Street. So between Columbia Gas and the Meridian Group, they've reached an agreement where the Meridian Group is going to pay for improvements at Columbia Gas's storage yard. They're going to add a motorized gate and do some fencing work so that Columbia Gas can take deliveries to their site from Potomac Street. So that agreement has been finalized as well. So I think that the concerns of Columbia Gas have been addressed by that. The third condition was that as part of this, the Meridian Group would agree to enter into an annexation agreement or a pre-annexation agreement with the city for the property that they want to develop down off of Sharpsburg Pike. That property is not currently in the city, but eventually they are going to want utility services from the city. And we just wanted to, put it on record that yes, you will, when we become contiguous to you, you will annex into the city. And that agreement has been executed as well. So I think that condition's been taken care of. The fourth condition had to do with CSX. We wanted some assurance from CSX that if we moved ahead with closing the Summit Avenue crossing, that they weren't going to stand in the way of getting the other 2 crossings at Park Circle fixed up. The Walnut Street crossing is in terrible condition. Virginia Avenue is not as bad, but it could use some attention as well. We just wanted to make sure that we didn't go through all this effort and then at the end of it, CSX said, sorry, we're not going to help you get those crossings fixed up. So there are actually 2 agreements that are attached to the memo that speak to that. One is an agreement that would be between the city and CSX that basically says, yes, the city will move ahead with closing the crossing. The city will pay the costs associated with that. And we're going to get reimbursed for those costs, but the city would commit to that. And as part of that, CSX has indicated in that agreement that they will not stand in the way of improving the other 2 railroad crossings, that they will give permission to the Maryland Department of Transportation to start the process of getting that funding in place and actually doing that project. There's a separate agreement also in here that would need to be executed between the city and the Department of Transportation. Basically, it's just an agreement that says the city is on board with the state getting this federal money to improve the other 2 crossings. And it's a standard agreement form that they have, but we would need to execute that as part of this package. So I think after years of working on this, I think we're finally to the point, if the council is in agreement and moving forward, I think that by the execution of these agreements, I think that that's going to clear the roadblocks to, actually physically close that crossing.
Quick question, Jim. For the other 2 that they're promising that they would help with the repairs as well, did they give us some kind of definite timeline or no? Like within the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or?
I think it's going to be more quickly than that. What has to happen is once the agreements are executed, then CSX is actually the one that will do the design of the improvements to those crossings. And then it has to be CSX contractors that do the work. The state has told me that once the agreement is executed, it's probably going to take them 4 to 6 months to get the funding totally locked in, because it's federal money that is passed through the state to get to this. So it's going to take a little bit of time for that. I'd say best case, they could possibly start on the improvements before the end of this calendar year, but I think it's probably more likely next spring. So I think within a year, I'd say you should see them working down there on this.
Any other questions, Jim?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the Maryland Water Infrastructure Financing Administration bond issue. Wastewater treatment plant improvement project. Nancy.
Hello.
Hello, good evening. This is good news. We are almost complete the design for the $20 million in improvements to the wastewater treatment plant. They're at 98%, which we call bid ready, and they're with MDE being reviewed. Once that review is complete, then we can actually advertise for the construction contractor. Prior to the Mayor and Council awarding the study or the design in January 24, MDE had indicated when they reviewed our funding application that the project did qualify for funding, and they added it to the state intended use plan. So they identified $20 million in total funding with $3 million in principal forgiveness. So what that means is we'll have two loans. We'll have a non-taxable loan of $17 million, and then the tax exempt loan is $17 million, and a taxable loan at $3 million. And that's described in the motion and the resolution as well. So I'm here tonight just to make you aware of the status of the project, and that we're just about ready to go to bid for construction. We anticipate breaking ground this fall, and the bond closing, the loan closing, would occur after we made the first payment to the contractor. We have to make that first disbursement of funds to the contractor, and then we move to loan closing. So if there's any questions.
Any questions for Nancy? No. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.
Next up, review committee recommendation of a proposal for community legacy strategic properties grant. Doug Reeser.
Good evening. So the RFP Review Committee reviewed a project for Bowman Development at 54 South Potomac Street and recommends approval of the project. So we've reviewed the project and we're recommending approval up to $185,780 for a total project budget of $371,560. The project is currently in progress. It worked its way through the permitting process yesterday and got the approval for that. The application originally came in June 13th of 25, and we received an updated packet in February. The eligibility period, we're recommending 30 days prior to the approval from Mayor and Council from the completion date. The completion deadline is June 19th, 2026. And just a little bit more about the project is the grant would actually enable Bowman to complete the remaining renovations of the vacant rear portions of the Masonic temples, the upper floors, the second and third floor. And in the packet, the review packet, there is the budget, the scope of the project, the design plans, and current conditions with pictures for you guys to take a look at. The funding, again, comes through the community legacy, and this is fiscal year 22 with the draft motion included as far as the source of funding for the project.
Is he just looking for commercial space there?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions for Doug? Nope.
All right,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, just coming in. Okay. Give him a chance to get in. All right. Next up is the Appalachian Regional Commission, FY '27 funding request. Matt Ross, walk in and sit down, man.
What we have is our annual request to the county for participation in the Appalachian Regional Commission's grant process. We have staff met from the various departments and came up with a slate of projects for which the city ought to request funding for. Those three are attached to the memo that was provided to you in your packet. First priority is funds for the update of the comprehensive plan. Then after that is transmission line upgrades to Zone 1 water line improvements with the Utilities Department. And then the third is Marsh Run Trail completion for completion of the construction plans. The comp plan, we estimate that the comp plan will cost in the vicinity of about $300,000 when we move forward with it. We're seeking $150,000. We've also been told that utilities, because a large portion of the comp plan is associated with our utilities, that they will be able to fund part of it as well. Transmission line upgrades, it's a project estimate of about $1 million. The request is going to be $500,000. With our match being $500,000 from the utility budget. And then the Marsh Run project, this is for completing the construction plans. The construction plans are at about 90%. This effort would take those plans to completion. And the estimated cost on that is $150,000, requesting half, $75,000, with the balance being from the general fund. The deadline to get the materials to the county for inclusion in the review process is April 3rd. So if you are okay with this, we would end up having a motion for you all at your next meeting to adopt so we can send it over to them.
So are you asking us this evening to rank those three or to accept the order in which you have provided them?
The request is for you to accept them in the order that we provided them, but if you want to rank them, that's your call.
I mean, my preference is always the water project. I see that the comp plan might be covered anyway, but for me, that's priority one.
I have to agree with you.
And I think the trail's a distant third.
So you want to go 2, 1, 3?
But that's just my opinion.
I agree with you.
I think you'll be successful in the other one anyway.
Yeah, everybody okay with
Yeah.
that?
Okay, thank you. We'll have a motion to you all in your packet next week for adoption or for approval.
All right, Steve, go ahead and do public hearing follow-up on rezoning applications, DM 2026-01 Charlie Drive, Emmett Road.
We have two of these this evening. I'm handling the first one, and Chris Burche is handling the second. We had two public hearings for the two rezonings. One was ZM 2026-01 for Trolley Drive, and the other one was for the Evergreen property that Chris is handling. For Trolley Drive, the area that is involved is 8.79 acres. And it's currently two zoning districts, R-Mod and CG, and it would be going to neighborhood mixed use. They are citing change in the character of the neighborhood as the justification for the rezoning. Both the staff and the planning commission agreed with that. They didn't really provide much argument about mistake, but it doesn't really surrender the argument either. We believe the stronger argument here is with the change in the nature of the surrounding area. So what we need at this point is some guidance from you all, whether you concur that the property meets one or the other of those criteria based on the material you took in testimony at the hearing. And we will then move forward with either an ordinance to amend the zoning map, if you move to change it, or if you decide not to rezone the property, then there would be a decision based on that decision, and there would be no ordinance because nothing's being amended at that point.
So I don't think that I have a problem with the rezoning. I think that what I continue to struggle with is simply a person who uses this road infrastructure on a regular basis and sees the deficiency. So when we get this presentation, right, and we got sort of both, rezoning approaches. Anyway, I can't help but when you go through this area, and maybe it's because the infrastructure isn't done yet, but it just feels like to me that government, meaning the city, the county, the town, whoever you want to encompass that being, has sort of failed because we get to see these single pictures, right? We make this single decision, and then from there, it's development off to the races, which that's just part and parcel. But between Heb and Emmert and what's the back road, Beaver Creek?
Beaver Creek.
And then the layout of the developments, within and about those, there has been, I shouldn't say has been, no. It just appears to me that there has been limited thought, like sat down and put in place to how all of this development of these previously very vacant and very limited traveled roads are being impacted and are going to be impacted. And I'm struggling at the moment when I look at this and I see just these colors on a piece of property on a map, and I see they're just going to simply connect to Emmert Road, right? This one's going to connect, and then another one's going to connect. And there isn't a lot, in my opinion, there doesn't appear, and I guess it's because maybe the physical constraints of the characteristics of those sort of old country roads that exist, there doesn't seem to be any demand, any tangible demand by any of the governmental entities that have responsibility over this to recognize the deficiencies in those roads and say they've got to somehow be addressed as part of the process of all the development happening around them. And not just these, but even the interconnectivity to 40. I mean, when you go down to the end of Beaver Creek Road, and you go left and right across that area, it has vastly changed in terms of the number of vehicle trips per day at that unsignalized, sort of very odd crossing. And then you go up to the next crossing, which is what? Is that Emmert? Or
If
Heb?
you're heading west, it's Emmert and Heb because they kind of split off
Right.
off a dual like this.
And there doesn't seem to be a lot going on there either. And then I have to put in the back of my mind the, I don't want to say odd, but I will say interesting. When I have to put into the back of my mind the interesting plan that was put forth before this body a few months ago of the big development across 40, where they were going to sort of do this, come up onto 40 and try and come out at some kind of like, I don't know what T they called it, which is in that vicinity. And the only thing we've really done is put a signalized intersection out onto 40, which I assume that this is going to sort of take the most impact of. That comes out, where you've got all of these crossings going on to get across to Martins and those road systems. And then you go back into the neighborhoods, and I'll use Gaver, I think it's called Gaver, right?
Gaver Meadows.
As an example, And you literally have roads within a neighborhood that dead end with chains across them with like a gravel strip to get out onto Beaver Creek Road. And then a bunch of cul-de-sacs that dead end within a neighborhood. And all the kids are standing out on Beaver Creek Road waiting for the bus, you know, twice a day. And it's like, yeah, here's where we should put 2,000 units is on Emmert and Hebb and Beaver Creek, but just leave them the old country roads that they exist as today. And I'm trying to wrap my brain around how that makes any logical sense to the impacts it's going to have to frankly, the folks that are out there already.
I can offer some comment on that. We have a number of things that are playing into this. First, we have 4 different jurisdictions that are involved. Dual highway is state highway.
Right.
We have the city of Hagerstown for the pieces of this that are within the city's boundaries. So that includes these properties here. It includes the Reese Farm development, which is across Emmert Road. But if you look at the municipal map and the boundaries, it's very irregular down in this area. There's a lot of area down there that is also still under the jurisdiction of the county. And then Gaber Meadows, which is, a couple hundred yards down Emmert Road.
On the backside.
Right, is in Funkstown. And the county has its own development standards. Funkstown has its development
Right.
standards. We have our development standards. There really isn't a good way to coordinate all of that. But with that said, when development goes through the process, Emmert Road being that it's a county road, the plans will be reviewed by the county's engineering department for any required improvements. That is a narrow right-of-way. Our ordinance actually requires the dedication of additional right-of-way. It's built right into ordinance. It's not negotiable.
So was Gaber, which is in Funkstown, reviewed by the county as well?
As far as its connections to Beaver Creek, I would say it was,
I
yeah.
mean, so that doesn't give me any great faith that somebody from that neighboring jurisdiction that has that authority is going to implement what I would consider to be an appropriate sort of road infrastructure system among the properties that works in I don't know if safe's the right way, just in a way that you know, to the average driver works. Like, so you have the drive coming out here onto Emmert, right? And I think Reese is across, right?
It's directly across where map says Corboy Drive. You drive straight across into Reese Farm.
So that intersection will actually line up, right? They're not going to be offset.
Correct.
One will go into the other.
Yes. Another thing to think about here too is the city can really only control those areas that are within its jurisdiction. And we've had conversations with the property owner on this. There's no development plan that's proposed at this point. Everything's just been kind of cocktail napkins. We're kind of thinking this, kind of thinking that. There's no specific plans that are set for this particular property, but one thing that we have been emphasizing at the staff level, and the developer is looking into it and is, I believe, is in agreement, is that there will be no new entrances onto Emmert Road. The development will be accessed, whatever is developed in that blue area will be accessed off of Trolley and or Corboy Drive. So there will be no new driveways, no new street entrance coming in off
So-
of Emmert.
How many units you think could go on this big blue piece of property?
How many could or how
Yeah.
many would likely? Because that's kind of two different
Well-
things.
Yeah, ballpark somewhere between the two.
If it was developed exclusively for townhouse development, you could probably get over 100 units in there. Practically speaking, 60.
Okay.
Kind of hard to tell until an engineer sits down and really starts dealing with it. But Emmert Road actually, because, and I'm sure you all have driven on it, is a very attractive country road. It's even got stone walls on this property. One of the things that we were brainstorming, we don't know if this will survive at the county level or not, but when the development comes in for review, encouraged to leave the stone wall where it is within the right of way, have sidewalk behind it, and preserve some of that character. So we're looking at those issues, but Emmert, I think, with the connection of Corboy and Trolley out directly onto Dual, is going to cut down on the amount of traffic on Emmert as you head toward Dual Highway. and there's not going to be anything directly on this property going onto it.
I just can't help but feel deficient in my ability to look at this and say, yes, I've made the best decision, even though, like I said, I'm okay with the rezoning request, and have to look at it in sort of this single block of this single property, of this single development proposal, when I know that there are 6 other developments happening around it that are all doing exactly the same things by themselves through several different jurisdictions, you know what I mean? And nobody's sitting down and going, okay, and if you tell me that's happening, that would be great, that here's how the road infrastructure will best flow together. Because right now I can tell you, when you're telling me that you'd like to preserve that stone wall character of Emmert Road, in my mind, as a driver, I'm hoping that they're gathering additional right of way from these properties that they develop so that they can widen Emmert Road at some point, because, you're going like this, up and down from point A to point B, and it doesn't appear that, no differently than Beaver Creek, that there's any real thought to sort of gaining ground, because there's this assumption that that road's simply just going to exist as it exists in perpetuity.
And ultimately, that would end up being, because it's a county road, that would be the county engineer's call. And maybe as they go through a development process, they will say that stone wall's got to go. Again, we're very, very early. I wouldn't even call it early yet. We're pre-planning the site. We've only had some really rough conversations. Some ideas were thrown around, but one thing that has been pretty common is you're not looking at a new street entrance onto Emmert, nor are you looking at driveway entrances onto Emmert with this development. Now, how wide that ends up getting, we don't know. A lot of that's going to depend on what the traffic counts are going to end up being, whether or not the county determines that there is a anticipated need. Again, you put the zoning and then you figure out the engineering later. That's just the way it is. So we don't know exactly how that'll play out, but we are heavily pushing for not having any new entrances onto Emmert.
You said there's currently a stone wall in Emmert?
Yes, there's a portion of the area across the front of this property. There is a stone wall that's close to the road.
Is that any like historical marker or anything like that, or?
Nothing I'm aware of.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then Stephen, I'm sorry, I know you're saying it's a little bit premature, it's a little early, but is there any way to get some kind of assurance from the county that some of the things that Councilmember Alshire is speaking on could be avoided? Like if we were to go ahead and have it approved?
As I understand Council Members Alshire's concerns, they're more of a 30,000 foot. How does this work with other properties that are already in development? Or already been developed? And
Or are
it's-
going to be developed.
There aren't a whole lot left out there that are going to be developed. You got the property to the west and then south of Emmert that is still, and that's outside the city. This property is not developed. But you got, the plans are already in place for the Reese Farm, which is across Emmert Road for townhouses and a large apartment complex. And the road network has been designed, the Reese Farm property is actually under, or was under the same ownership as the people who own this. And they intentionally designed Reese and then Corboy Drive on this property, which has now been built to create a four-way intersection. So as the developments are happening, they're happening with the direction of the city and the county engineers as far as what is the best design for the circumstances available.
I guess, and I just, again, I'll go back to sort of like keeping in the back of the mind, one, Beaver Creek is one of the few types of roads at one of our major, probably one of our most major interstate intersections, where there is that accessibility to get from one side of the interstate to the other without, you know what I mean, without having to interrupt flow to the interstate. And then we're going to have that connectivity sooner or later from across 40 to undeveloped land on this side.
Yeah.
And there is huge, huge acreage on the northeast, I guess it'd be the northeast or southeast corner. You know what I mean? that also has that flow over 40 directly onto Beaver Creek. And I just, yeah, I do. I wish I did have that sort of like 30,000, mile view to say, here's the best way that these roads or the connectivity of these properties should flow over time, because there are hundreds of acres of development yet to occur among multiple jurisdictions in what is one of our busiest interstate, on and off around the city. I guess it's like I said, I don't know that I have an issue with the rezoning as much as I do. I feel like every time I say yes, I'm just saying yes to an individual party. That individual party is doing what they want to do to maximize, the marketability of their property, without great thought as to the interconnectivity and I don't want to say efficiency or appropriateness of the infrastructure of that property. No differently than I think about, what's the water pressure out here? On our system, I have to think, okay, what's the road pressure?
Yeah. And that's part of the problem with this field as a whole, is the zoning always comes first, because nobody's going to pay the money to do engineering on a site that they don't have zoning for. So everything is kind of ethereal at this point.
But we know today the roads that exist today. There should be some way that the town and the city and the county and the state could sit down and say, we know the roads that exist today. We have an awareness of, what would make them deficient tomorrow. Therefore, we have the ability to outline how they can best interconnect, as it occurs. I guess that's sort of what I guess, I feel like I'm going to be like out of that part, understanding where it rests in the process, but that gate opens as soon as we make this decision. We make this decision then without any thought or application of that thought to those other metrics we should be considering in this thought.
And as each property does come online, the development standards are for that property, where they had to meet current engineering expectations. When Reese Farm was designed, the county required certain improvements along Emmert Road, along its frontage, which are, I'm not sure if they're complete yet, but at least they're under construction, because the development's under construction at this point. So I completely understand what you're saying. It's not a perfect situation.
Yeah, I mean, where Heb and Emmert meet, isn't a good situation. Where I guess it's Heb that crosses Beaver Creek, or maybe it's Emmert that crosses Beaver Creek, isn't a good situation.
We have looked at this a lot over the years. There's road improvements that are outlined in the comp plan, et cetera. Part of that area is not developed out yet. For example, the red area on this map that you see here in the top part, that's all commercial regional zone. That's up there toward the where the lawnmower shop and all that is, up close to Lois Harrison Boulevard. That's all remains to be developed as commercial. Paul Smith Boulevard ultimately will connect to Heb. If somebody was to ask me my personal opinion, for what it's worth, I would want to see that Heb and Emmert be disconnected from Dual and have people go out to signalize intersections. But we have no control over that. That's
Right.
state highway.
But that should be, I agree with that assertion, no differently than when I guess it was Wagaman that was disconnected from Brushwood Pike. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, there was a reason for that, and then there was a plan, to take an alternative, appropriate approach. I guess it's Wagaman.
So I guess the question is, where do we go from here? Do we have direction from you all today? You're operating on a rezoning hearing, which you're operating off of a record in which you took testimony and the record is now closed. If you wanted more information or more discussion, we might have to reopen that process, and I'd have to consult the city attorney on exactly how we would do that.
I mean, like I said, I don't have a huge problem with the rezoning, and I don't think we got much pushback from the public at large on through the hearing process.
Yeah.
I think that the pushback that I heard, I think is exactly that same tangible concern that I have, which is, okay, how is this old country road that all this stuff's going to go onto be improved to appropriately accommodate it?
Right.
I haven't heard an answer from any governmental jurisdiction yet through the course of any of these development projects that's going to answer that question. And I'm not saying that this guy, meaning this particular project or property has to be the one that answers it.
Right.
But we should definitely be coordinating some type of conversation to have those answers.
We can definitely look into that. Another thing to take into consideration as well is it's not like the property does not have zoning now. It has R mod zoning on part of it and CG. Theoretically, somebody could develop it now and put a bunch of houses on part of it and commercial operations that generate a lot of traffic as well. So this is not a zero-sum game kind of situation. We're changing the zoning. We're not assigning zoning where it did not exist.
No, I feel like we're having almost that similar conversation as we did for the development across the road that said, hey, we're going to have this road come out as a ramp and come up onto 40.
The Dowd Farm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we all sat there and went, I don't know how that's going to work. Somebody needs to explain that. But, we really didn't have an explanation for how that was going to work. So I feel like we're entering that same sort of, at least for me, that same sort of scratching my head as I have for the other side of the road. And I just want whatever we're going to do to work road-wise for whatever does occur there.
So what is your direction to us?
Yeah, I'm fine with the rezoning, but are you guys, I don't know if you guys can even reach out to the state highway or anything about that, because, I'm all for development. The thing is, it's just, we put a bunch of houses and, it's just like we have a bunch of warehouses here, but yet they still haven't widened 81 for a long time. So there's 18-wheelers everywhere and it's backing up traffic and there's accidents and it's dangerous. So
We could definitely reach out to the state highway.
that'd be good.
And open up some dialogue on how this is all going to play out. Because there is one very large property that's to the west of this that hasn't developed yet in that immediate region. Between Reese Farm, Gaber Meadows, this property here, when it comes online, a big chunk of that area is essentially set. But there, as you mentioned, there are other large tracks, and a couple of them in the immediate area that are going to impact things. So. So
Council,
Is that a-
I guess what direction you want to go in?
is that we move forward, but also contact State Highway?
I would.
Yes, and can I just give you one example? I'm sorry. I was just trying to get to the exact. You might not be familiar with Cabin Branch, which is in Clarksburg. Okay, so the agreement that they kind of went into was the developer, once he built a certain amount of the single-family homes, there's a crossroad on 355 on Frederick Road where, again, that opening would be necessary for a lot of the new homeowners to be able to come in and out, especially to access 270 and 355. So that was closed for a long time. So if you lived in that new home development area, you had to go like a crazy route to just even get out. And a lot of the folks in the town were complaining for at least 2 to 3 years. So they came to an agreement, and I'm not sure if that was with the state highway or if that was their local jurisdiction, but then they eventually had that opened up. So I guess that's what we're trying to figure out, if there's any kind of assurance we could have in writing, just so that we know we're moving in the right direction besides just approving the rezoning. Because I think, again, we're all on the same table of course, we want to see new development. We want to see new homes. But we don't want to be in that situation where I can recall, because I did live there, and I'm telling you, it was a hot mess. You could not access 355 on Frederick Road. You could not, because of how the developers built those homes. So it took 2 years of complaining, of folks in those houses to complain. So if there's anything that we could do to kind of like avoid or have a repeat of that similar situation, because I mean, we don't know, but it's a possibility that the folks down at Gaver Meadows are experiencing some of those issues as well. Like just for them to leave or get to certain routes, they have to take, you know, extracurricular routes just to get out, which is, you know, unfortunate. And we don't want that to fall back on a downfall as to there's great new homes available in Hagerstown, but when you get to these new homes, it's always troublesome to get to work on time or come back home on time. You see what I mean? So those are kind of like the negatives we should avoid, just looking into the future for new projects.
Well, we can definitely reach out to state highway and the county. I don't know in the short term what commitments or final resolutions could we come up with in anything resembling the timeframe that this property owner would like to move forward with this zoning. But we can look at it again, especially since there is a property adjacent to this across Corboy Drive that's large and sooner or later will develop. As far as this particular property, these areas, the problem is getting into town, because the crossover at Hebb, I don't believe allows a left turn out to go into town. Also, when you go out the trolley, that's a right in, right out only. There's no crossover there either. So getting out to 70 is, and you also have Beaver Creek Road. So getting out to 70 from this area is not an issue. It's, if you want to go into town, you basically got to go in Beaver Creek through Funkstown to get
You
into
got to go
town.
around.
Yeah. And there's no real solution to that until such time as Paul Smith Boulevard's built through. So should I move forward with drafting up an ordinance to amend the map based on their argument of change then? Okay. And we'll reach out to the county and the state about the regional patterns there.
I think when I was county commissioner, I remember Joe Crowbeth put a map up on the board once for us, and I want to say it's the Mulligan's Avenue exit. But he was showing us the difference between sort of like, you know, planning the road infrastructure ahead on another exit off of 81, and then not planning the road infrastructure ahead up at, I'm pretty sure it was that particular intersection. So you get off that west side and it sort of like starts to, condense itself because the properties have sort of locked themselves in, which didn't allow
Right.
that opportunity. And that's, I guess, what I'm trying to take a look at.
Okay. And I was looking to see if Jim Bender was still here, because technically the road improvement issues, that's a city engineer issue, not necessarily a planning issue. So if he was here, I would have asked him to weigh in on that, but he's not here at the moment. So, okay, well then we'll move forward on that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Broche.
So the next rezoning, ZM 2026-02, is for the rezoning of the corner parcel on the northeastern corner of Eastern Boulevard and Leisburg Pike. It had gone to public hearing February 24th in front of the mayor and city council. And then March 17th went to planning commission, where they did support the rezoning, but there was one comment that was received when the record was opened for that. And that was attached to your memo as form as an email. The rezoning currently wants to go, or the applicant wants to go from CL, which is its current rezoning, commercial local, to commercial general. And the applicant cited kind of to open up the uses that were allowed to be placed on the corner lot. So now we're kind of just looking for direction similarly to the last rezoning, as far as if you would support their change in the character of the neighborhood, which they kind of had reasoning for, and the mistake in the existing zoning. Planning kind of supports more the change in the character of the neighborhood, but they understand that the mistake in zoning also is a viable.
Have we got many responses via email on that?
No, just one response, and it was about the sensitivity status of the wetland in Hamilton Run.
Okay.
This is a property where the POM zoning, they could not find anybody to develop it under the POM zoning. Then they asked for CG, they got CL at the comp plan. And CL is a very limited zoning district. This particular property is actually kind of an anomaly as far as its size and the fact that it's unimproved. Most of our CL zoning districts are corners at established dense residential areas, such as some corners out on, say, West Washington Street, places like that. So this is kind of a rather peculiar property for a CL zoning district. But they can't, and it significantly limits the potential commercial uses in the CL, because the CL is typically embedded in dense residential areas, which this obviously is not. As a result, given also the access issues are complicating it as well. The access into that site is fairly poor. They're going to have very strict controls on access to the site off of Ladersburg. It's pretty much going to be a right in, right out. And then whatever access that's going to be off of Northern will be pushed to the absolute farthest eastern edge of that property as possible in the design. So they have topography, they have access, and then they complicating things. And then when you put the additional heavy burden of stripping away a lot of potential commercial uses off of that property by the CL zoning not being as permissive as the CG, they just haven't been able to. Nobody's interested in developing it.
Sat there for quite a while. Yeah. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the general disposition, I mean, this property's been around a long time. This property was, under consideration when I first got elected, when that Lowe's development was in its conceptual phase. And the rub at that time was the fact that the developer of the Lowe's property, if I recall correctly, didn't want to put a crossing across to connect to this property, to develop this property as well. And that sort of shot some of that, because the issue was the access, because Eastern Boulevard and Potomac wasn't improved the way it is now.
Right.
I mean, that's a reality. So that has clearly changed
There was a
over time.
willingness thing, but also the topography there would be very problematic in creating a crossing. 'Cause you
Oh, I
have
know, that
Hamilton
was the big
Run.
argument. The cost was
Yeah,
astronomical.
Yeah, because Hamilton Run runs through there, and it's like a bottomlands. As you're
Right.
heading north and you see the former bank building there, there's a big retaining wall there.
Yeah, you'd have to build like a huge
Another
bridge
retaining wall.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I think that the alternative is, folks that are opposed just, frankly, over time just don't want to see anything there. And I don't think that's, sort of a reasonable alternative.
And we would actually have to be careful. I would want to consult counsel on this, but if you have zoning that's in place that effectively eliminates
Right.
the ability to develop property, it could be viewed as a taking.
Yeah.
So is everybody okay with CL to CG on this?
Yes.
And we'll craft the decision based on both change and mistake.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up, our acting city administrator, Don Francis, with the collective bargaining agreement for ASHME 1540.
So we have a tentative agreement with 1540. It was reached about 2 weeks ago. 1540 did subsequently vote. Majority voted for yes. I've attached a schedule of the changes. Most notable, I think, are the pay increases, 3% for FY '26, 5% for FY '27, and 4% for FY '28. The other two things that you instructed me to negotiate were the healthcare changes, which ultimately were changed. We will now be able to make changes to employee premiums when necessary, up to 25% of what they pay currently. I will tell you that historically, we have never had an increase that would require a 25% increase of employee premiums. It's just, it would be astronomical. We The lion's share of our insurance increase actually occurs in the reinsurance, the premium that we pay for stop-loss insurance beyond $250,000, for instance. So, and then finally, your request was that I negotiate the Me Too clause out. I have done that. There is still a Me Too clause. It no longer includes pay. The Me Too says that if the council or the city decides to give a stipend to a group or a bonus to a group, they would take play, or they would partake of that as well. To my knowledge, recently, the only historic bonus or stipend we've ever given is the one that we gave just after COVID. And I think this particular concern that they had was because we had a conversation about whether or not we wanted to bifurcate bonuses to groups in different ways according to the risk that they were taking. And ultimately, we chose not to do that anyways. We gave it all to everybody, and that was the end of it. But they were particularly sensitive to that, so they asked for that, and that was it. The biweekly pay is also a part of the negotiated agreement now. So the three things that we absolutely felt like we had to have, we got out of this. I'm happy to go through anything that you'd like to talk about. Again, I've given you a schedule of the changes, but I suspect if you look at Article 20, Section 4 was specific to the Me Too agreement. That's the one that you told me that we were not going to settle without. So,
Under Article 13, overtime,
yes.
is that a revision of definition? Is that our definition as revised or their proposed for emergencies?
Oh, that was ours.
Okay.
We have always had difficulty, especially in things like snow emergencies or water main breaks. And every time it happened, we wound up with grievances. So we've defined what an
Yeah.
overtime
That's why I like that,
emergency is.
this section. That's why I asked. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I'll bring it back next week.
Thank you.
Okay, city administrator,
Nothing from me.
Councilwoman Anderson.
I just wanted to thank the Washington County Parks and Recreation for putting on the annual 5K Run Fest event. It was really fun. We got to see a lot of people. A lot of kids were motivated. And my favorite part was the volunteers, because their signs were crazy. There was one that said, "Keep running, you got to get sexy with it." And I was like, okay, I'll keep running. So, yep, I just wanted to give a shout out and, thank everyone that did come out. And it did feel really wholesome as a community. I do want to say that. It was nice seeing Michelle Gordon. It was nice seeing some of our county commissioners. It was nice seeing you, Mayor. It was nice seeing your families. So overall, I just think, yes, get involved with our events. They're definitely fulfilling. And that's all I have.
Councilman Flaherty.
Yeah, I was just gonna wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day, and thanks for Hagerstown Fire Department. They've been busy putting out a lot of fires lately, so they have had their work cut out for them.
Councilman Alshire.
Nothing this evening.
Councilwoman Bell.
Yeah, I would like to ask mayor and council if it's possible, if the community can use one of the parcels on Jonathan Street. And I know, and I'm asking this because most of it is in court, so I don't know how that works, if we can still use it for the garden. So I'm just curious if we can.
From our neighborhood first meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, do you know anything about that? Whether you're allowed to use them?
Like if it's in court right now, as far as I know, I don't.
Is it in probate?
Yeah, some of the, I really don't know. I just know many of the parcels down there are in court. So
You mean for liens, like probate?
I'm not sure. But a couple of them are, we wanted to see if we could utilize them for the community garden there. But everything that's vacant is pretty much in court right now. As far as I know, I don't know how court's going, or how that all works out. But I'm asking that because it's almost time to try to put some seeds in the ground, and I didn't know how that works.
We can ask staff to look into it.
Yeah, we'll check into it.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
I'll back up what Councilwoman Anderson said. The event, the St. Patty's Run was great, and like she said, it was great to see city officials and county officials and everybody together. It did feel that way. I was one of the ones bringing up the rear because I had to push my grandkids around everywhere, and they had to make like 5, 6 stops, but it was a great time, and I was glad to see you there as well. And that's it for me. Do I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on any items tonight? Okay, we're adjourned.